They spent $200,000 on their kids' education, and their kids don't, in some cases, no longer even communicate with them. And because they've been discipled to believe that their parents are racist and homophobes and all kinds of stuff in the name of Jesus, I can't put these people on a podcast. They are reeling. They are trying to just figure out what in the world happened to break up their family.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is the Alisa Childers Podcast. I'm Alisa Childers, and today I'm going to be talking with my good friend, Krista Bontrager, who you may know as Theology Mom. You may know her as one half of the Center for Biblical Unity, and by the wonderful book that she co-wrote with Monique Duson called Walking in Unity, that I had the honor and privilege of writing the foreword for. But we're not going to be talking about any of that today. We're going to be talking all about Biola. So to catch everybody up with what has been going on, several months ago, I made an offhanded comment in one of the episodes that I was doing with, I believe it was Dr. Everett Piper, about the progressive drift in many of our colleges and institutions, about how I could no longer recommend Biola University as a place that Christian parents could send their kids to. Now, I didn't expect the amount of questions I received after saying that. I got lots of emails, people on social media asking me to comment a little bit more and explain why I had said that. So I decided to go ahead and dig down a little bit into it. And I tweeted out just some of the public policies that were available at the time regarding Biola, which really sparked a lot of people to realize for the first time that things may not be exactly what they were expecting at Biola. And then Krista really has done the bulk of the research on what's really going on at Biola. And so I want to just state right off the bat that our hearts are not to tear down, but to build up, to preserve truth, and ultimately my heart and my goal is to help Christian parents to make an informed decision, because I'm thinking about the students. I'm thinking about those kids that we've heard lots of stories of kids having deconstructed as a result of going to Biola, maybe a result of one professor. I want to say that there are some really great people at Biola. There's some really fantastic, solid professors at Biola that I would be thrilled to have as someone who's teaching my kids. But there seems to be some other stuff going on. And so we're going to talk about all of that today. This is the episode that's going to catch you up on all of the things that are going on at Biola. A couple of announcements I want to make, though, before I bring Krista on. I want to remind you, I've been talking about this over the last couple of episodes, that I am having the awesome privilege of going to Israel for the first time. I'm so excited. I have never gotten to go, and I've always wanted to go. And I've been invited to be a part of a trip from Dr. Mel Winstead, who's New Testament professor at Southern Evangelical Seminary. And we have spots open for you guys to join us. If you've always wanted to go to Israel, maybe you've been before, you want to go again, definitely consider, pray about coming with us. We're going to be going June 1st through June 10th. And I will put the link to where you can register in the show notes, because it's way too hard to say just on the air. But I would love to have you join us. Now, the spots are filling up very quickly, so I would urge you that if this is something that you want to do, go ahead and jump on it and click the link. We'll put it in the show notes there. Also, just a reminder that I have the new student edition of Another Gospel that has come out. It's a book that traces my faith crisis through the questions I asked, the darkest times of doubt, and then talking about the movement of progressive Christianity, which is where my doubt was facilitated, and answering that movement from a biblical worldview. We have rewritten the book. A lot of the material is the same, but we've updated it with examples that'll be more relevant for students. We've added discussion questions. There's little breakout boxes, and so we have carefully curated this to be something that will be very helpful to Gen Z, because I think this is a topic that they really need to be aware of. So anywhere from middle school all the way up through college, Another Gospel Student Edition, that's available everywhere that you find your books. And I had misspoken last week. I want to just make a little correction. I had said we only have 2 more episodes. They're actually going to be 3. So you guys get 3 more episodes before my sabbatical. And then we will kind of shut things down throughout the month of December. We'll have a couple of little fun surprises in there. Of course, the Unshaken Faith live stream will happen sometime during the month of December. And I have a little video with a exclusive clip from a new documentary that's going to be coming out that I'll be dropping somewhere in the middle of December. But other than that, we're kind of done with podcasts after the next 3. So just be aware of that. Be praying for me and my family as I go on sabbatical and kind of hunker down and enjoy all of the things I love about the holidays. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So I would appreciate your prayers for that. And now I'm going to bring on Krista. So Krista, welcome to the show. You've been doing a lot of research about Biola. Of course, you're a Biola graduate. You hold 3 degrees from Biola. This is an institution that you love. And I shared my heart that one of the reasons that motivates me to kind of talk about this right now is mainly because I'm thinking of the students and the parents. I want Christian parents to have all the information about what they're getting themselves into should they decide to send their student to Biola. I know that you have a very specific reason that you've been speaking about this. So I'll ask you, why are you speaking out about this, especially when you know so many people there, you love so many people there? Why have you chosen to do this?
Well, I'm not really sure how I got into this situation, to be honest. About 5 years ago, my oldest daughter was a student at Biola. We are a 3-generation Biola family. My husband's parents both went there. My husband and I both graduated from Biola in the early 1990s. And then we started saving when our children were born to be able to, for them to go to Biola when it was time. And it was a lovely experience that we had at Biola. I love the institution. And I think there's some unique features about Biola that set it apart from a lot of other Christian colleges. And when my daughter came home during the pandemic, I realized very quickly that her faith was in trouble.
Mm.
And she had been exposed to a lot of ideas that I considered to be fairly progressive and progressive leaning, but it was in a wrapper of Christian discipleship and love for neighbor. And I was concerned. And so I thought, well, surely this is a mistake. This is just 1 or 2 rogue profs. I can get to the bottom of this. I still know a lot of people at Biola. I had been on faculty, adjunct faculty 3 times in my adult life in different seasons of my life. So I know a lot of people there. And so I started reaching out and saying, hey, like, what's going on? And that led to many private meetings. I would say at least 15 to 20 private meetings with deans, department chairs, parents, former students, current students, just a lot of different people, staff members. And as a result of all of those conversations, I started noticing a pattern and a story arc that the problems at Biola were not just 1 or 2 rogue profs, but that it was ideology that was a system that was embedded from the top down. And I do mean the tippy top down. And it took me a while to get into reality about it and to accept that, because this institution that I had loved and that the president had led us to believe was still faithful, and that they were still on their core mission of standing strong as a conservative voice in the middle of all of the progressive noise. That was what was sold to us as parents. And when I started realizing, oh, there's a forward facing, on paper faithfulness here, but behind the scenes, there are some things happening in some departments that are pretty out of step with the historic Christian worldview. I began to talk about it and write about it in 2020 and 2021, but that was only after I had had many private conversations, because people are going to come on here and say, well, why are you doing this publicly? Why didn't you go to them first? I did that. I did that many times over. And when I realized that polite private conversations were not going to change anything, and we can talk about that if you want, the kind of the final straw for me in that moment, I told the highest levels of leadership that I would use my platform to expose what was happening. And I stopped after about 2021 because I was tired. I felt alone. I felt like no one else was talking about it. Nobody was interested in the conversation. So I kind of stopped. But those blog posts remained on my website with all the documentation. And then when you had text, I think I did one more podcast last year when they dissolved the diversity and inclusion department. So I thought that was a good step forward. But then when you and I had a text exchange back in around the first week of October, and you made a Twitter post, and then later that same day, Monique and I went on a live stream and read the gender policies on a live stream on a Sunday afternoon. I was not prepared for the response because for me, I've been talking about this for 5 years. I couldn't get anybody to listen or care. But the response since early October has led to me doing a considerable amount of more research and more content as to try to make a case publicly to save the institution that I love. And that's what all of this is about. It's about love. I'm fighting for Biola because I love Biola. This is not about trying to close them down. I'm not even really trying to shame them. I am trying to maybe point out some rot, but that's not to say that they haven't made some good changes. And again, we can talk about that later. But I choose to fight for Biola because I wanted to endure for another generation. And I also want parents to have informed consent. And I do have some concerns about transparency.
Right. And so back in October, when I had made a post about Biola, I had basically just found there's two different sexuality statements. So there was kind of the original one that's really orthodox, no issues, no problems. But I couldn't believe what I was reading when I read this kind of more, I guess, how it's applied. And I'm trying to find the post here because I do think it's important to talk about, even at one point, how it was saying, that Biola asks transgender individuals to wait until they're not at Biola anymore to do a medical transition, which of course is allowing for the category of transgender to be an identity category that would be, at least according to the statement, if a professor were affirming of a trans identity, then that would give them room to do that. There was tons of concessions to the language of queer theory. And so let's go though to the straw that broke the camel's back for you back then, because I think that is relevant to the conversation. What was it that made you realize you're just not going to get anywhere with these private conversations?
Yeah, and if people want documentation of all of my research, they can just go on Facebook to Theology Mom, and everything is there with receipts, screen caps, summaries of everything. So things that we'll just kind of skim over here, they can read more of those details of everything that's there. But there was a conversation that Monique, my ministry partner, and I had back in 2020. I think it was early 2021 that we met with. And I'm not allowed to say because this is what Biola does, is they'll allow you in the private conversation, but then they make you swear to confidentiality. So I can't say exactly who the people are, but I can tell you that they were at the highest levels. They were the people who were appointed as the gatekeepers to protect the institution against liberal drift. They had been appointed by a committee of concerned faculty to be the gatekeepers to right the ship. And there was a big meeting back in maybe 2018 by concerned faculty. And these people were appointed to investigate the claims and to right the ship. So I was talking to the right people. I was talking to the people that had the job of protecting the university. And this was the second or third meeting we had with these individuals. And I asked the question in that meeting, is it your position that the spectrum of beliefs that Biola is willing to hire faculty on, that there's a spectrum of someone who is, I would consider a very biblically sound, biblically faithful person like J.P. Moreland or my friend Thaddeus Williams, And also on the spectrum would be someone who is more, I would say, center-left leaning, of someone like Brad Christerson, who heads up the sociology department and has some somewhat socialist leaning types of posts on social
And I'll
media.
just say, I think you're being incredibly gracious to say center left. I mean, there are screenshots of him marching in the No Kings, protest. There's pictures of his
He marched in the
door.
BLM rally in 2020. I did post a picture of his faculty door. So people can make up their own minds about that, but I'm going to be as gracious as I can and say, call him center left. And I said, so everyone on that spectrum and everything in between, you're okay with. And these two individuals who were put in charge of protecting the institution from drift said, yes, we are comfortable with that spectrum. And that spectrum represents our statement of faith. And I said, okay, I appreciate the clarity. I said, well, then would you be willing to establish a study committee to look into or work toward a public position statement on critical theory and social justice? Because this university had a pattern or a precedent of doing that in the past. They had put together a statement on pro-life issues, on theistic evolution, on Eastern Orthodoxy in the late 90s. They did that. I was on faculty then. And so when issues come up, they put together study committees and they come up with public statements. And that was my proposed solution was, would you consider putting together a study committee to come up with a position statement about social justice and the critical social theories? And the very clear answer to me at that time was no, we would not. There's no need. And at that point, I can admit that I emotionally checked out of the conversation because I knew that there was no way forward for change.
Right.
Monique finished that conversation with them. And then she has mentioned this publicly now, so I think I can say this. She had one more conversation without me. She had an hour and a half discussion with Dr. Barry Corey, the president, in July of 2021. And that was our last private discussion with people in the administration. So yes, we did all of our due diligence in that. And that was the moment where I knew, okay, now I have to apply public pressure.
Right. Okay. And if anyone's unfamiliar, and just keep everybody following along, Monique is Krista's ministry partner at Center for Biblical
Right.
Unity, who was also a Biola student, and I believe also a Biola graduate, right, Krista?
Correct. In the
Yes.
sociology. She has a degree in sociology.
Right. Okay. All right. I do want to come back to the doctrinal statement in just a moment, but first, I want to take a pause and go to our first sponsor, which is Adele Cosmetics. I love talking about Adele Cosmetics because this is a natural cosmetics company, family-run, holistic, handcrafted, toxin-free. All of it is made in the USA. Transparent, clean beauty for every skin type. They have beautiful color cosmetics. I'm wearing a ton of them today, as I always am. I use a ton of their skincare. These are just really natural, clean, amazing products, and they've got some really, really pretty Christmas stuff. So I really want to encourage you to go to AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com. That's spelled ADEL, naturalcosmetics.com. They have a Christmas body oil, a lotion bar. They have a lip tint that is so beautiful that is just kind of sheer, but you can build it up to the perfect Christmas red. And I just love that they are focused on a biblical worldview of not just being so vain, but yet also taking good care of yourself. So all the women in your life, if they love products at all, they're going to want some Adele for Christmas. So go to AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com and you can use my code Alisa for 25% off your first time order. Again, that's AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com and you can use my code Alisa on that. Okay, Krista, let's go back to talking about the doctrinal statement here because you know the doctrinal statement at Biola that they've had forever is really good. It's really solid. But one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people will say, well, I went on the website of this church or this college or whatever the institution might be, and they'll say, that is a solid doctrinal statement. We're good to go. It's a solid place. But you can't necessarily assume that just because an institution has a solid doctrinal statement, that it's being implemented, that every professor, every employee, every person that is involved in leadership is being being held accountable to the statement. In fact, that's where we see a lot of mission drift, is that you can have the statement that says one thing, but the institution is way over here. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know Biola has like 100-year-old statement of faith that is really solid. So help us process that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because Biola is just a test case. It's just a model of principles that you can apply at any Christian institution that you love, including your child's Christian school or your local church. And a statement of faith to me is like a foundation. And if I'm building a house, there's many parts of the house. One is the foundation, then we have the superstructure, and then we have the inside of, how we're decking it out, And to me, the position statement or the statement of faith is the foundation. And this is one of the reasons why I fight for Biola, because the foundation is so strong. I believe that it can be turned around
Wow.
because their statement of faith is unchanged for 100 years. And so there's something that can root the conversation that we can return to. But a position statement is not enough. There's also policies and practices that are built on that position statement. And that is part of the culture of an institution that really is, how do we live out our position statement in our everyday life? And that is how you hire and how you talk and what trainings you onboard your new employees with, and how you disciple the students that are under your care. These things are all part of policies and practices. So you need a pipeline, ideally, where you have a strong foundation of position statements, but then you have a superstructure of policies that are grounded on those position statements. And then you also have internal practices that are grounded on the policies and the position statements. And you need all of those things to align. And so you can have the most beautiful institution like Biola does, where all the students take 30 units of Bible and where chapel is required and all the faculty have to sign a statement of faith. And even all the students have to sign a statement of faith and the code of conduct, which is all awesome and amazing and unique and beautiful. But if you don't have policies and practices that reinforce those position statements, it can turn into a contradictory mess.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really where I've seen Biola struggle since around 2012 that I've documented. Now, I've had some people write to me and say, oh, no, the problems are much more older than that. But my documentation and my research kind of goes back to 2012 as being a pivotal year.
Mm-hmm.
And that the practices and the policies have not always been in alignment with the position statement.
So you mentioned the social justice, that they didn't want to come out with a position paper on DEI or social justice. And this is something that is very interesting to me because in my work, I interact with progressive Christianity quite a bit. I wrote a whole book about that. I've done a ton of content analyzing the beliefs of progressive Christians. And I was really shocked. I did not see this coming just because it wasn't in my wheelhouse, I guess you could say. But around 2020, when all of the social upheaval was happening, I was so shocked when I watched just, platforms, influencers, coalitions, whatever they might be, start drifting into social justice ideology. But otherwise, they had the doctrinal boxes checked correctly. Like they're going to be solid on the atonement. They're going to be solid on the virgin birth and the deity of Jesus, his resurrection, his second coming. Like all of that was fine. But you see them kind of drifting left through this sort of avenue of social justice. And that was really, I'll just be honest with you, tough for me to try to sort out. Because I had made it my case beforehand to say, well, look, if we're all agreeing on the correct doctrine, then we can agree to disagree on secondary issues. It became very clear to me very quickly during that time that you cannot agree to disagree when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and what we're broadly calling like a contemporary social justice ideology that was really infiltrating the church. A lot of Christians were seeing this, and I think it took some of us by surprise. And so this is one of the big issues with Biola. And so we saw that there was maybe a massive drift between 2009 and 2012 when they started bringing in principles related to DEI. So can you give us a little bit of that? Like what you actually wrote a really great article that we will for sure link that says Unpacking Biola's DEI Push, Promises, Policies, and the Need for Repentance. And this is important too, because a lot of the things that we're going to be bringing out in the show today, some of these, they have quietly course corrected. Even after we tweeted about the policy on gender and transgender and all of that, they kind of quietly changed some of the wording, but didn't really publicly say, hey, we blew it, we're correcting this. And so when there's no public repentance, really it's just kind of like sweeping it under the rug. And then people don't realize that you've made those changes or you've quietly scrubbed something off of a website. And so I think that it would be better for Biola to say, look, hey, we got this wrong. We're changing this. And we repent of allowing this stuff to come in, because as we'll see as we go along, the leadership that allowed what we're about to talk about is still there. The one that allowed this drift, that never publicly repented, but just kind of maybe quietly made a few changes, is still there. And so that's kind of the issue that we're going to be talking about. But so go ahead and talk about that history for us, because my understanding is that it got kind of real bad for a little while, then it got a little better, and maybe it's getting better. I'm not sure, but go ahead and tell me what you think.
So from what I can tell from what's publicly available, and I only comment for the most part on what's publicly available or people that I have directly spoken to that have firsthand knowledge of things. I try not to go on hearsay, third-party statements, and that sort of a thing. So from what I can tell, Biola put in place the first kind of diversity administrator in 2009. And that person now, I believe, is on the board at Seattle Pacific and has taken those ideas up there. But that person was appointed to begin to bring in diversity policies and ideas. Eventually, what happened was that a provost was hired named Dr. Deborah Taylor to implement diversity kind of from the top down. And she first got on my radar back in 2020, I believe. And I was able to get a hold of her doctoral dissertation. And so I read through her dissertation. It's basically a how-to manual on how to take a predominantly white evangelical university and begin to help it undergo a structural transformation to be embedded with diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology. And in my opinion, DEI is the practical application of the critical social theories. So if people want to know more about, well, what is this critical social theories you're talking about, go read Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer's book, Critical Dilemma. That'll explain it. But then DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion are very pretty words that is essentially the praxis of the critical social theories. It's applying it to our institutions, to hiring and promotion and restructuring the ideals and the trainings and how people are going to think. And that transformation that started happening, Dr. Taylor was in charge of. There was first they passed a statement on unity and diversity in January of 2019. And then from there, they developed a strategic plan for diversity that was supposed to be implemented in 2020, but then the pandemic happened. And so it was a little bit delayed. But the idea of this strategic plan was to, throughout the entire university, including every class syllabus, was to implement principles of DEI. And they were going to have, even down to all the textbooks and the lessons, were all going to incorporate and embed principles of DEI into what they were doing. Now, they did do some public-facing statements about diversity and equity, and they had some videos featuring high-up administrators talking about these things. But the way that they defined them was using a lot of Bible verses and wrapping it in language of Christian discipleship. The problem is that behind the scenes, they were really just using the secular framework of DEI as it's outlined in the standard secular textbooks and implementing that in the university. So again, there was kind of this two tiers of messaging of what was forward facing to donors and alumni that was wrapped in a lot of Bible verses, but then what was happening behind the scenes, where I've had multiple faculty tell me, that they felt like it was a lot of, to use a shorthand way of saying it, was a lot of white shaming. It was a lot of, I'm not sure we're really promoting white people this year. I'm not sure that we're hiring white people. We're really giving preferential treatment to hiring minorities right now. And we're not going to advance these applicants, even though they're qualified, because we're looking for minority applicants. And this was the environment that developed between about 2012 and 2022. And then Deborah Taylor announced her retirement in 2022. I don't know if that was in part due to public pressure. I don't want to think that anything that I did in 2020 and 2021 had that sort of impact, because again, I felt like nobody was really listening to me. But maybe that had some role to play. I don't know. Maybe some people were waking up to what was really happening. But Taylor departed in 2022 in the summer, and then Biola brought on Matt Hall in the summer of 2022. Now, people might remember Matt Hall. He used to be I believe it was at Southern Seminary, and he's kind of an interesting guy. I first want to say that many faculty have reported to me that he has been a big improvement and that he has been part of an effort to turn the university back toward its heritage. And there's a lot of positive things that have happened with Matt Hall as the provost, and that there have been good changes. But he's a guy that kind of confuses me. There is a video of him in 2018 on a podcast where he says very clearly, "I'm white, and I will always be white, and because I'm white, I'm a racist. I will always be a racist until the day that I die." It's a very famous clip.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically critical race theory rhetoric that he's putting forward there. But then by late 2019, there's another article where he seems to repudiate critical race theory. I would love it if he wants to come on my podcast and explain his evolution. I would love to talk to him and give him an opportunity to clarify, like, did he change his mind? Did he see the light? Like, where is he at now? He's a little bit confusing to me, if I'm honest. Like, I don't know where he's at. I would love to see a public clarification of his positions. I will say, to his credit, under his administration, like, they did dissolve the diversity and inclusion department on July 1st of 2024. That seems like a good move. They did put some of those staff in a different department, and they did part ways with some of the staff. So I have unanswered questions, but based on faculty reports, some good changes have been made under Matt Hall's leadership, and I'm grateful for that. So I want to give credit where credit is due. I had another faculty member tell me that he estimates that about 30 left-leaning faculty and staff have left since they brought on Matt Hall. So that's good. They've either left by their own free will and self-selected out, or their programs were eliminated. They left under different circumstances. But what I don't know so much is about how they're hiring now. Like, I really hope that maybe they're curtailing some of the previous hiring practices, maybe changing back to a more merit-based system and less favoring or partiality toward minorities. Like, let's have merit-based blind hiring practices. I don't know where they are with that. I would love to know, but hopefully those are good changes that are happening behind the scenes too, but I haven't had those reports.
Well, and also I've said many times on the podcast, you can kind of get a feel for what the culture is like on campus by looking at some of the chapels. And I want to talk about the chapels in just a
Yeah.
moment. But first, I want to go to our second sponsor, which is 7 Weeks Coffee. You all know how much I love 7 Weeks Coffee because they are America's pro-life coffee company, and they're on a mission to fund the pro-life movement 1 cup of coffee at a time. This is honestly the perfect gift to bring to someone's house if they invite you over. It's a great stocking stuffer. There's all sorts of ways that you can order it, just a one-time thing, or you can subscribe to the Heartbeat Club where it comes to your door every single month. I get my espresso beans through 7 Weeks Coffee every single month. It is the best coffee I've ever had, shade-grown, mold-free, low-acid, organically farmed. And I love that they have built their business around saving lives. And they do that by donating 10% of every sale to pregnancy centers and pro-life organizations nationwide. And they've raised over $1 million. So I know you have a lot of options for your Christmas presents and your stocking stuffers. Give 7 Weeks Coffee a try. Go to 7weekscoffee.com today. You can use my code Alisa. And if you subscribe, you get 15% off even if you don't use the code. But if you use my code, you're going to get an additional 10% off for 25% off of your first order. And if you also use that code Alisa, you're going to get to choose up to 4 free gifts. So again, go to 7weekscoffee.com. Use my code Alisa for those extra gifts and for that extra savings. Again, 7weekscoffee.com. Use my code Alisa. Okay, so Krista, I want to talk a bit about the chapels because that was one of the first posts that I had made back in October, where I talked about several years ago, there was a chapel speaker named Shaniqua Walker Barnes, and she spoke at a couple. Did I say that name right? I'm
Yeah,
hoping I said
she's
it
a
right.
delight.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, so she's a womanist theologian, and womanist means Black
Yep.
feminism. So she's a Black feminist
Yes.
theologian, and she spoke at a couple of chapels. And basically what I had said was, has Biola ever acknowledged this? Have they ever repented of this? And as of the time that I had posted this was still on their YouTube channel, available for
Right.
people to watch. And there are many, many more. I went down a deep rabbit trail one day, too many to even give in one podcast, of just very problematic chapels that have happened around this DEI type of theme, social justice type of theme, critical race theory type of theme. And if you're unfamiliar with Shaniqua Walker Barnes, anybody who's listening to us, this is a woman who wrote a prayer called Prayer of a Weary Black Woman. And this kind of went viral when people saw that this had been included in a progressive Christian book on prayer. And it begins with, "Dear God, please help me to hate white people, or at least to want to hate them." And you can read, you can find that available online. You can read more of that prayer, and it gets worse the more you read. So people will say, well, you didn't read the whole thing. Well, I did. And it's actually worse when you read the whole thing. But that's just one example of the lack of vetting, I don't know what it is, around this topic of social justice, around the topic of this DEI type of stuff. So, and what people need to understand too, and Krista, you can explain this even better than I can, is that when we're talking about things like critical race theory, a lot of people are aware of that right now because of all the stuff that we went through in 2020. But what people don't seem to realize is that critical race theory is like a subset of a broader category called critical theory, which Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer call contemporary critical theory, because it's just kind of in the weeds now. It's just become its own thing.
Yeah.
So they're calling it contemporary critical theory, but it's essentially a type of ideology that functions like a worldview that analyzes power and basically wants to identify the power differentials and then even out the outcome for everyone. So kind of like a social justice, how Vodi Bakum defined social justice. And critical race theory is just one subset of that, but there's all sorts of other categories this is applied to: disability theology, critical queer theory, critical feminist theory. There's all sorts of different arms, and they're all connected. You can't just say, oh, we're only going to use it for race, because the way the whole thing functions, it it functions over this larger umbrella that really pits people against each other as oppressed versus oppressor. The end goal of critical theory is not unity. It's not understanding. It's revolution, because it's a theory of conflict. So I want to, if you have anything more to say on the race type of approach, let's pivot a little bit now to the LGBTQ, because this is the thing that was really concerning me. Some of the material that I found, of course, there is a Biola sanctioned group called The Dwelling, which is a group for LGBTQ plus people. And it was reported in the Chimes, which is the online Biola magazine, that there are people in this group that are affirming of gay relationships and identities. Also, there are people who are not affirming. And this was, I think, something that was very shocking and alarming to a lot of Christian parents that were thinking about Biola. So maybe comment on that and what you have learned just in the LGBTQ approach that Biola is taking.
Yeah, I think that Biola has a history for about 15 years or so of really trying to struggle through the question of how to best engage in discipleship of people who self-identify in the LGBTQ community. And I think that they have been on a journey. I went yesterday and went on the Chimes, and I want to just clarify something you said. The
Okay.
Chimes is the student newspaper.
Student
And
newspaper,
so,
okay.
yeah, so it has a faculty advisor, but all of the articles are written by students. I was someone who wrote for the Chimes when I was a student. And so you have some faculty theoretical oversight, but I can't say I even ever met with a faculty person when I
Okay.
wrote for the Chimes. You're just sort of out there as a journalism student in the wild and writing articles that interest you. And so if you go back in time in the Chimes and you just do a search on the term homosexuality on the Chimes website, it's fascinating because you start seeing how Biola has been grappling with how to minister to this community for a very long time. And you can see the imprecision of the early language and that they were really not at all sure how to deal with these issues. And there have been at least, I think, 3, possibly 4 different statements on gender. And I was able to track down in the Wayback Machine the initial one that was passed in May of 2012 after some very public events happened. And um, that one reads more like a theology statement. It really has very little pastoral insight into discipleship issues. It's just more of a like a statement of faith. And then in 2016, Biola launched a group called Sustainaire. And again, this is a Biola sponsored group. This is not a student club. This is paid staff people who were in charge of trying to put some kind of mechanism together to minister to these students. The Their kind of statement, I'll just read it here, the group is designed to provide a caring and supportive community where students can journey together as they learn to live authentically and lovingly with same-sex attractions, orientations, and identities. And these orientations and identities was the wording that really jumped out to me because these are ideas that really come more out of queer theory than historic Christianity. In 2017, there was an incident on campus where there was actually a pride display for Lent that was set up in front of the cafeteria, which is a very public thoroughfare. And there was a pride flag and a trans flag that were set up on this display that was supposed to kind of, I think, be a prompt for meditation. And they had many other displays, all for oppressed people groups. And so this display was to highlight the oppressed group of the quote unquote gay community at Biola. And I have so many questions about this. But then the flag was stolen. And the way the Chimes reports it is that it was desecrated. The display was desecrated because the pride flag was stolen. I have questions about how there was a pride display for Lent in the first place that was approved by the administration. But anyways, that incident then led to more conversations from Biola administration of how are we caring for these students? What are we doing? They dissolved the Sustainaire group, and then they established another group called the Dwelling in the spring of 2018. That group's statement says the Dwelling aims to be a caring and supportive community where students who identify as LGBTQ or experience same-sex attraction can follow Jesus together as they seek to navigate their sexuality and gender in allegiance to Christ by the power of the Holy Spirit, living in accordance with Biola's community standards on sexual behavior. Well, again, what jumps out to me about this wording is that it's a lot of inspiration from modern psychology and queer theory. It seems to accommodate the idea of the alphabet LGBTQ and identity and sexuality and gender. These are all words that aren't really defined and could be easily defined by a psychological lens. And there is a graduate school of Rosemead that is at Biola that has a lot of prominence. And so it's all very confusing. But again, this was a Biola sanctioned ministry, and the head of pastoral care is currently a gentleman named Chad Miller. And the Chimes quotes him as saying, what the Dwelling is not, is it's not a place that sponsors conversion therapy or whose primary goal is to move out of the LGBT community. And my question to that is, why not? Well, first of all, how are you defining conversion therapy? Because some people will define conversion therapy as encouraging people to explore maybe some traumas or root issues or,
Well, let's be
you
honest. I
know,
mean, conversion therapy these days just means any kind of encouragement. Like, let's say somebody
sanctification.
struggles. Yeah, if somebody struggles with same-sex attraction, conversion therapy now is just considered anybody who would say, well, hey, let's see if we can move toward being sanctified of those desires. That would be considered conversion therapy. And so that's what people are, I think that's such a tricky phrase because a lot of people hear conversion therapy and they think it's like pray the gay away and some kind of torture thing that's happening in counseling offices, which, I'm sure there are some horrible things happening under that banner. But any kind of encouragement to say, hey, let's move towards sanctification and ask the Lord to heal of the, to do healing of trauma, we don't want these desires. That's considered conversion therapy as well.
And that's what makes it so confusing. And there is a statement on the Rosemead School of Psychology webpage that explicitly says that they do not teach conversion therapy. And I'm thinking, I don't know what that means. Does that mean we're not teaching repentance? Does that mean we're
Right.
not teaching acknowledging it's a sin? We're calling it identity a whole lot. This is all kind of unbiblical language. So it's really hard to know what we're talking about. And I think that Miller, again, he's the head of pastoral care at Biola. He goes on to say in the Chimes article, it's not a place where we are trying to hash out political issues or change views of anybody. Well, we might need to try to persuade people. We
Yeah.
might need to help them have better minds about who God says that they are. And so if the idea is to just love people and affirm them and help them get resourced to the Biola Counseling Center or through the Dwelling, which is what one RA told me in a recent interview that I did off the record, but he did allow me to record it. His position was when he received his RA training, I asked him, like, how are you trained to help and support these students who were same-sex attracted or identifying as queer? He said, we were told to accept them, love them, affirm them, and if they wanted resourcing, send them to the Biola Counseling Center or to the Dwelling. But that we were definitely not to tell them that they ought to change. Like, that's not what they were up to. And he even said that there was a fellow RA on his staff that when they went home for the pandemic, he could clearly see that the RA was posting pictures with his boyfriend and kissing his boyfriend and, was actively engaged in a gay lifestyle, but still being an RA for Biola. And
Yeah.
it was just said that it was just so much confusing messaging that seemed to go against the policies and the position statement of the university, but the practices were not in alignment.
Right. And that's so often what we see with the mission drift, just as we talked about before. You can have the greatest statement in the world, but if you don't have something in place for people, even that, as you go down the chain to say, hey, this is happening, this person was posting this, they're an RA, something needs to be done. But when those things aren't in place and there's not really strong leadership that's holding people to the belief statements and to the code of conduct that they signed and to the sexuality statement that exists there, then ultimately what you end up having is a bunch of people deconstructing with a great, doctrinal statement. And that is the testimony that we see over and over and over again from so many Christian parents. As I've been posting about this on social media, I just can't tell you the sheer numbers of people who have had students go through Biola who have come into the comments saying, my child deconstructed. I sent them to Biola and they came home a radical feminist. They came home deconstructed. And, even just and I would just encourage everybody who's watching this, do your own research. Just search the website and take a look. Because I just, in a cursory little thing, found 2 or 3 professors that had pronouns in their bios, for example, on LinkedIn. There was a former Biola professor who actually commented on LinkedIn about us, Krista, and calling us racist, deeply racist and disgusting for pointing out some of these things. And this is somebody that shaped the lives
Although
of
he
a
did
lot.
apologize after you kind of called him out on it.
He sort of, yeah. He did apologize for saying that we were racist. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that there were people who had their whole formative years shaped by somebody like this during their time at Biola. And that's what I can't get out of my mind. It's like, yes, I hope that people who are solid on the inside are trying to bring change from the inside. That's what I would be doing if I was there. And I'm hoping that they're successful. I'm praying for them. But in the meantime, I'm thinking about the student that's about to go there and who will only be there for the next 4 or 5 years. And what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen in their life as everybody's trying to kind of slowly drift back? Like this, in my experience, I don't have much hope. I think I'm less optimistic than you are, Krista, that there's going to be enough radical change because it's going to take something radical. Something like this, to right a ship like this, takes something really, really radical. And I'm hoping and praying that that will happen. And we'll talk more about it in just a second. I just want to go to our final sponsor here, and that's Good Ranchers. I love Good Ranchers. They are our most long-standing sponsor, and I'm so grateful every single month when my box of better than organic chicken, grass-fed beef arrives at my door. I can put it in the freezer and then just have that ready to go when I want to put a meal on the table for my family. And I used to think I knew what I was getting at the grocery store until I found out that over 85% of grass-fed beef sold in America is imported. But it can actually still be labeled like it's from here. So that just had me questioning everything, which is why I love that Good Ranchers is 100% American raised on local farms. It's harvested right here and it's delivered right to my door. Amazing quality. And so I really want to encourage you this Christmas season. This is a great gift for the person that has everything. You can go to goodranchers.com today to see what all the fuss is about and shop American meat you can trust. And when you use my code, you're going to get a discount. So my code is Alisa. Go to goodranchers.com. You can use my code Alisa. You have until December 1st, actually, to get one add-on for the life of your subscription and also $100 off of your first 3 orders. So how that breaks down is $40 off your first order, $30 off your second, and $30 off your third, totaling $100 off, plus that free add-on for the life of your subscription. You have till December 1st to grab that deal, so I'd really encourage you to do that. Go to goodranchers.com, use my code Alisa. Again, goodranchers.com, use my code Alisa. All right, Krista, let's talk more about their gender policies, because this is, I think, what maybe caused some of the firestorm is when we tweeted out these gender policies that were just public information. And then my concern as well, not to throw too much at our audience today, but I was deeply concerned that they had hosted Rich Viodas, who is a pastor who promotes contemplative spirituality. He's a huge fan of Richard Rohr. He promotes Rohr all over his website. And, anybody who's listened to me at any amount of time knows that Richard Rohr, I don't hesitate to call a heretic. He denies core essentials of the Christian faith, is teaching a completely different version of Christianity. And this is something that obviously that's not necessarily guilt by association, because this is someone that Viodas is promoting. And also some of the comments that he has made that indicate that he is really leaning into critical social justice. And this is somebody that they invited for a contemplative spirituality night. So I have a lot of questions and concerns about stuff like that. But we tweeted that, and so there was these gender policies that kind of got quietly changed. But
Yeah.
is there anything else we want to say about the chapels before we move on to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is people can still go on the main Biola YouTube channel and look at past chapels, but they also have video recordings there from what were called the SCORE conference, which was a racial reconciliation conference that Biola organized and sponsored up until just pretty recently, a couple years ago. And they used to put almost all their chapels up on their channel. Now, I just discovered recently, like a month ago, that they now have another channel called Biola Chapel Channel, where they post the chapel messages, but there's hardly any videos there. And they started that that channel 2 years ago. I don't know if it's because I did too much content a few years ago about watching Biola chapels, and I'll admit it, I sent a lot of Biola chapels to Woke Preacher Clips.
Did you?
And he wrote, yeah, I was a source for some of those, and he reposted them because he had a bigger platform. And Biola has stopped posting most of their chapels.
Oh,
And
okay.
so the lack of transparency about who their platform, the only reason you know about the Rich Viodas thing was because he was what's called a Tory Bible conference speaker. And that is their annual Bible conference. And so he came for that. But if you go to the Biola Chapel page, they've really, they're not posting most of their chapels anymore. So really hard to tell what's happening in the campus culture. And this is part of
Right.
my concern in many Christian colleges is the hiddenness of the culture. And they have the external forward-facing things that they show to alumni and donors that can look very biblically faithful, but what you don't know is what's not public and that
Right.
what the students experience. So I do have concerns about the lack of transparency about chapels.
Well, and let me add to
The
that
other
too, because one of the
Yeah,
things that really bothered me is after I even put on X, like I was really not wanting exposing Biola to become my whole personality, but they just keep doing
right.
stuff that makes me want to keep talking about it. And one of those things was that after I posted about Viodas, and I actually had a couple of exchanges with him, and one of their board members had come in, and I was interacting with them. But after that, then they took the link down where they had brought
Yeah.
Viodas in. I'm like, well, if there's nothing to see here, why do you take it down? Leave it up and it would prove me wrong, right? But it's frustrating when people are trying to bring light to something to just kind of be sweeping things under the rug quietly, and then you don't, like to your point, then you don't actually know what's happening on campus in the actual culture.
It makes you feel very suspicious. And whenever I point out something, I know it's going to disappear. So I have to get my screen caps
Wow.
good before I say anything publicly, because this is what they do. When they changed the gender policies, you and I commented on October 10th on the gender policies. You made a post on X. Monique and I did a live stream. And then by November 3rd, they had silently changed the policies. I had screen caps. So then I posted on Theology Mom a side-by-side comparison, old policies, new policies, because this is what they do. They scrub things. And so it's frustrating to me. It's like, well, if there was nothing wrong and this had been up, those gender policies have been up there for years. And you're telling parents and donors, hey, there's nothing to see here. Everything's cool. But all it took was you and I pointing something out, reading public policies in public, then all of a sudden they wanted them changed. It's like what's happening. It's very concerning. I think those policies, this is an opinion, I think those policies would still be up on the Biola website if you and I hadn't pointed
Oh,
them
for
out.
sure. For sure. Yeah, because it was there for some reason, I don't know why, but it really it brought a lot of attention to it. And then yeah,
And
well,
the
there's
new policies are an improvement. I want to say that
yeah.
they are an improvement, but still, like, why? Why change them silently?
Well, that's
Why
why see,
not?
that's why it's like what that says to me is there's not strong enough leadership to actually bring change, but just to do some damage control. And that's what makes me sad because, like, I think about my seminary, Southern Evangelical Seminary, none of this would happen because they have such strong policies in place. 2020, they immediately wrote a social justice position paper. They're not afraid to fire people. But when you let 100 things go, then you got 100 things to kind of do damage control on. But it's just, I don't know. I'm just not, I hope, I pray, I want to see them right the ship. I do. I want them to. But I don't know.
And to your
Maybe I'm not as
point,
hopeful as you.
and to your point earlier about the parents, I have received many letters as well from brokenhearted parents. I received one letter, I think it was last week or the week before, from a dad. He sent 3 of his 4 children to Biola. All 3 of them have deconstructed.
Yeah.
And I think 2 of them are queer now. And I can't put these people on a podcast. People are like, "Well, prove your allegations, prove
Yeah.
the implications of this." But these people are crushed.
Yeah.
They are traumatized. They spent $200,000 on their kids' education, and their kids don't, in some cases, no longer even communicate with them. And because they've been discipled to believe that their parents are racist and homophobes and all kinds of stuff in the name of Jesus, I can't put these people on a podcast. They are reeling, they are trying to just figure out what in the world happened to break up their family. And
Wow.
so it's hard. And so I'm like, okay, I'll take the blows. I'll take the
Yeah.
collateral damage on that. But I'm standing in for the people who don't have a voice and have been deeply traumatized by these
Yeah.
policies and practices. So that's the other thing I just wanted to add about the parents.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about a couple of objections that are for sure going to come into the comments here. We already dealt with
Sure.
one. Did you actually talk to people privately? Now, you have relationship and connection with Biola. So you kind of answered that you for sure have done that. Now, people will say that about me. Well, did you reach out to the leadership first? And no, I didn't because there's no biblical command when things are public, when there's an institution that has public policies, there's no biblical command to go check with them to retweet a public policy publicly. I didn't say anything that wasn't available as public information. And and I don't even think there'd be anything wrong with me saying, look, here's what's happening. Here's why I think this is wrong and unbiblical. But even so, I was just saying, hey, I was asking questions like, does every professor have to sign off on this? Is this something that Biola has acknowledged and repented of? And so there's no Matthew 18 application, which, Matthew 18 says go to them first. That has to do with when a brother or sister has sinned against you personally and you
Right.
want to go to them privately first. That does not apply to public policy and commenting on public things. Whatever the measure of reach a particular teaching has, that's how you match it with your response. To the point that I wrote a book. People wrote a book about me, about my book. They have every right to do that because a public statement is fair game for a public response. So just to answer that, as people are for sure going to come in our comments and say that. But here's another one I see a lot. I've seen a lot of people say, well, I had a great experience at Biola. My kids love Biola. This is just a witch hunt. Biola's awesome. And they'll say, compared to so many other schools, they're so great. Like, what might you say to that? Because I know we'll get some of that as well.
I agree. Biola's a great place. That's why I'm fighting for it. I think it's unique. Many Christian colleges do not require their students to sign a statement of faith, only the faculty. Biola, to my knowledge, is the only Christian university that requires 30 units of Bible in order to graduate. They have required chapels. Like, there are so many good things about Biola. I am not disputing that. I am not disputing that maybe your student has had a great experience. But that doesn't diminish the reality of what's happened in the past from like 2012 to 2021, 22, that those were dark times. And the students that were there in that era have been profoundly impacted. And I would love Biola. I think one way out of this for Biola is increased transparency, but also for them to start doing surveys of their graduates 3 years, 5 years, 10 years after graduation. What is the percentage of the students that are holding on to their faith? How effective is Biola in discipling its students so that there's more accountability? Some Christian universities do those kinds of studies on their alumni.
Yeah.
I would love to see those numbers because anecdotally, I think that the majority of Biola grads deconstruct. But I could be way off, and I would love to be. Maybe it's just a selection effect of the people who have contacted me. But I'm wondering if the number is over 50%.
Yeah.
But Biola could shut me up really fast if they would start collecting their own data and surveying their own alumni and figuring out how effective they have been in their discipleship. I think that's a way out of this for them.
Yeah, that's good. Well,
I
I
think
also
that
want to pop in with one more thing too before you go on, because I don't want this to get biased without mentioning what Monique kind of uncovered. I believe it was yesterday at the time we're recording this. And this is just one little cog in the wheel, right? There's just every time I kind of research something like this will pop up. A professor with pronouns in bios, a professor that marched in the No Kings protest. And then, of course, Monique found this Biola professor who does spiritualist performance art. So I will also post a link to Monique's live, which was really good and pretty spicy. She got some spice going on toward this. But basically, there's this Biola University art professor, 15 plus years on faculty, who openly engages in, I'm going to put this in heavy quotes, performance art that explores 19th century occult spiritualism. And this invites participants to interact with esoteric symbology, ritual magic, confetti divination. You cannot make this up, where you do the birthday confetti, you throw it, and then you read it like tea leaves. And even I was thinking of ancient Egypt when they would read the intestines. You know, that's what was going on in Moses' time. Pendulums, complete with an $85 divination toolkit promising personal guidance and enlightenment. So this is a professor at Biola. Now, somebody might say, well, I had a great experience at Biola because, you know, maybe you just did the nursing program or something and you didn't
exactly. Yeah.
experience any of this. But for the kid who's real artistic, and then this is their art teacher, you know, and this is, by the way, not hidden. This is publicly available, leadership approved. So it's just, you know,
and
how
so,
does this happen?
That's my question too. And so my response to I had a great experience at Biola, or my kid loves Biola people, is that's great for you, but let's look at the bigger picture. Let's look at the impact of these kind of dark years of between 2012 and 2022. Let's look at still lingering problems. Sean McDowell has admitted, like, he wouldn't send his kid to be a sociology major at Biola. I have a lot of questions about that. Like, why is that okay? Why is it okay to say, like, there's a rogue professor, a rogue
Why
department?
is that rogue professor there? Why is he there? That's the question.
Tenure? I don't know. It's that's all the only answer to that question that I've ever received from administrators is tenure. But
isn't there a Supreme Court, I'm just learning about this, a Supreme Court ruling that allows institutions to actually fire tenured professors. Do you know about this?
I haven't looked into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. But
that's all I'll say, because I haven't looked deeply into it either, but maybe that's an angle
but
to pursue, you know, research on.
But there's other departments at Biola that are problematic. And so the art professor that you're bringing up is just one example. I am researching a few other examples that we haven't gone public about yet. But I think that Sean is underestimating the depth of the rot in some places. And so there are some majors that are great. And I want to again affirm there are many biblically faithful professors at Biola. I love them. I bless them. I've talked to many of them, and many of them are cheering us on and saying, please keep going.
Yeah.
But they can't go on the record because they want to keep their jobs and they love Biola too. And so they're fighting the fight from the inside. And I'm fighting the fight through public pressure. And we respect each other. And all of us have the same goal of preserving Biola. So that's kind of my rejoinder to that objection.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Obviously, let's just cover it. People are going to say it's slander, but slander is when you're lying about someone.
Right.
Slander isn't when you make an informed opinion about the drift of a university, or if somebody were to analyze my work and say, I think she does not get progressive Christianity at all. That's not slander. That's their opinion. That's them analyzing my work and saying, now, I disagree with their opinion. I think I do understand it, but that's not slander. We have to remember what these words actually mean. But you can comment on that, but I also want to throw it over to you. Couple of more questions that I really want to get your. What do you want to see happen? What if you could wave a magic wand? What do you want Biola to do?
Yeah. So first, let me address the objection that this is slander. I just invite people when I had somebody write to me just last night. It's like, I'm so disappointed in you. Okay, that's fine. I asked back, like, what have I reported that is inaccurate or a lie? And they said, well, nothing. I just don't like your approach. Okay, that's fine. You can not like my approach. Great. And we can see that differently. I've tried to do things as best I can. I'm not perfect. I have had the private meetings, but I really try to be as accurate as I can. That's not to say I'm inerrant. Only the Bible is inerrant. But for example, just a quick update on the art professor. I think even though we called the school on Friday before we did the live stream to confirm the person was still employed, as of today, that faculty member's webpage has been removed off the Biola website. So I don't know what happened there. But Biola is silent, and they make silent changes. And so we don't know. We don't know what happened. Maybe prior to the live stream that professor had already parted ways with the university. We don't know, but that page was active through at least Sunday.
Yeah.
And then we point it out, and then it quietly goes away. So this is the MO. So getting to what would I like to see is more transparency. I would like to see public repentance of we lost our way. We've made some mistakes. Very specifically, these are the mistakes that we made. We bought into DEI, the secular version of DEI. We were putting our professors through these trainings. We had a confusing gender policy. Here's how we're discipling students now. Here's the mistakes we've made. Here's the changes that we're implementing. If Krista ruled the world, that's what would happen. I had a very prominent professor tell me a couple of weeks ago on a call that will never happen because it would open the university up to lawsuits from parents.
Oh.
So I'm not expecting that. I would love to see that, but I'm not expecting that. It's disheartening to me to see all the silent removals of things and not acknowledging, like, hey, we had this professor on staff who was doing occultic performance art for over 15 years. We promoted this person multiple times. This person served on multiple committees and had influence as an academic advisor with students. I would love to see some public explanation of that, not just a silent removal of their faculty page, because silently removing the faculty page does not answer the question of how did this person stay employed all this time. I can't be the Biola HR background check department, although I feel like I'm turning into that. If they would like to pay me, they can bring me on as a consultant. Like, it's easy. All I'm doing is looking up things that are public.
Yeah.
But what I would love to see is more transparency. I would love to see repentance. and an acknowledgement. And I would love to see them bring in chapel speakers that are friends of mine. I would love to see them bring in people like you, Alisa, and people like my friend Elizabeth Urbanovitz
Mm.
to be a consultant for the education department. I would love to see them bring in people like Brett Kunkel, Erin Kunkel from Maven, and let Erin share her story of redemption with the students. I would love to see them bring into chapel again my friend Beckett Cook, who they brought in about 12 years ago, but hasn't been back since.
And he's a Biola graduate, right?
He is a Talbot grad. Yeah.
Mhm.
I would love to, just go through the list of people like that Monique and I have had on our podcast of all the things. I would love to see those people as chapel speakers. Like, why do they constantly platform people who are center and center left? If you go on the Biola YouTube channel, there are a lot of center and center left people that were soft rolling liberation theology, critical social theory, social justice to students on the regular
Mm.
4 and 5 years ago.
Well, and that was another
So
thing Rich Viotis was doing is he, on his Twitter, he's praising James Cone over and over again and saying how the theology of James Cone very much shaped him theologically. So this isn't just like a random, I quoted this guy one time. This is like somebody who shaped his theology, and they're bringing him in and defending that choice. Even one of the board members in my Twitter comments, defending that
and I don't
choice.
understand this is, if Krista ruled the world, we would have better chapel speakers. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just I don't know why they're not doing that. I I think that until we see some public statements and some public movements, it's going to be really hard to rebuild trust. I've had donors reach out to me. I've had many alumni reach out to me, and they are grateful for what we're doing, but it's caused them to have many of the same questions as I do. And again, this is not about tanking Biola. It's about loving Biola and saying, I want you to be the best version of yourself, because I want students to have the same beautiful experience that my husband and I had when we went there.
yeah. Okay, final thoughts to parents. I know that there are probably a lot of parents who are considering where to send their kids to college, and maybe they're concerned, or maybe it's a parent that's had a kid deconstruct out of Biola. Just give a final word of maybe encouragement, maybe exhortation to any Christian parents that are watching us today.
Yeah. So, first of all, the most common question I get is, you don't like Biola, they're conservative. Where do I send my kid? I don't recommend any schools. I don't want to be in that business. There's too many variables for families that they have to weigh out of what's good for them. These days, I'm saying, even maybe have a conversation with your kid about whether or not they really even need a college education.
That's
Maybe it would
it.
be
Yeah.
better for you to support them in starting a business, or sending them a trade school, or investing that money and helping them buy a house. For
Mhm.
$200,000, you can get a pretty good down payment
Yeah,
on a house
that's
and
right.
set your kid up for some good situations. Um, Definitely, like, think about other options. If your kid is dead set, like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a teacher, and a college education is absolutely necessary, they cannot make forward progress without it, then you're going to have some work to do. I have a video on my channel at Theology Mom that people can look at. It's called How to Vet a Christian College, where I train parents to basically do what I have done. And that is how to research a college. And so I walk them through kind of the 5 steps of that. The other thing I want to let people know is about faithfulcolleges.org. They have a college guide. You can set up an account. It's a free account. It's a little bit of an effort to get it set up, because there's like double verification and all of this kind of stuff. But once you get in the tool, it is free. And you can type in there like your parameters of what you're looking for in a college. It could be cost or a particular major or whatever. And it will evaluate it. And one of the evaluations that it gives is, where is it at with DEI? Where is it at on queer issues? And it rates the colleges for you, and it gives you all the data. It's a very helpful tool. Again, that's at faithfulcolleges.org. or their tool is at their college guide. You just hit the college guide. It's christiancollegeguide.com. So those would be my two things: is use the tool and watch my video on how to vet a Christian college.
Very good. Well, any other final words, Krista? I want to make sure you got to say everything you wanted to say.
I think I want to encourage people to fight for their institution that they love. So maybe this whole conversation about Biola, they're like, this isn't for me, but it is for you, because all of us have had an institution that's helped shape our lives, whether that's in campus ministry when we were in college, or our local church, or your Christian college that you went to. Like, our institutions matter. They're worth fighting for. I've fought for Biola. You can fight for your institution that you love. And hopefully you get inspiration from me, or you're get some ideas about how to stand. And my recommendation to you is, for nuts and bolts, is get a Substack, start documenting things, screen caps, videos, set up an X account, make posts, tag leaders, try to focus on facts, not emotion, not how you feel about it, but, really put out the facts so that it's impugnable. Like, they can't come against it, because you're just pointing out the reality of the situation. Keep affirming your love for the institution, why you're doing this. And you have to do that repeatedly, because people will constantly question your motivations. Target donors if you can, other people who love the institution. Be brave, because you won't be liked. People will call you names. They'll say things about you that just simply aren't true. You got to be strong. But if you love the institution, let your love for the institution be bigger than your feelings about what people are going to say about you. Pray about it. Always be in prayer. Praise real progress when you see it. Don't praise promises of progress. Praise real progress when things have really changed. And be prepared for leaders and people you love and have admired to minimize you, to disparage you, and even to lie about you. That's part of the price you will pay. But again, let your love for the institution be bigger than all of that. So
love that. So good. Well, I want to thank my guest, Krista Bontrager. You can find her at Theology Mom. She's on YouTube, on Facebook, all the places. And then, of course, with Monique Dussault at the Center for Biblical Unity, where they really talk about justice issues from a biblical and Christian perspective. They have gone deep into the literature to help, and they're just such an invaluable resource. So I really want to encourage you guys to follow them and follow Krista. And also, I'm going to be putting some links in the show notes. Now, I'm trying not to overwhelm with 100 things, but I'm going to put 4 or 5 links of a really good place to get started if you're wanting to learn more about what we're talking about as it relates to Biola University. And I just want to echo what Krista is saying. We're living in a culture that's very kind of volatile. When you speak out about things, people don't like it. They get very angry. They're going to call you names. But just remember that they hated Christ. And Jesus said, you will be hated. So we know what we're signing up for when we're Christians, and we're Christians who are living for truth and trying to uncover truth. People don't like it. And so I just want to encourage you to keep truth at the forefront. Truth is when you say something that corresponds with reality, then you've told the truth. That's common sense. That's what we should be doing as Christians, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. We follow truth, and we are people of the truth. So I just want to encourage you with that I don't care if I'm on the right side of whatever, as long as I'm on the right side of Jesus. That's my main concern. And so I just want to encourage you, as you pursue Christ, to keep a sharp mind, a soft heart, and a thick skin. We'll see you next time.